much dogs people in here, like very much so. I love dogs, waterfowl hunter, training dogs, the whole thing. And we were talking the other day on the podcast, and Trail said, if there was 100,000 golden doodles running around, like, yeah, they're golden doodles. We love them, but like, you gotta deal with them, especially if the law says it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, I don't care what it is. If it's overpopulated and you're impacting other species, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
Whether it's golden retrievers or wild horses, right?
The damage to the range is centuries.
On airplane
mode. We're not going to see it fixed in our lifetime in a lot of places.
Well, compare it to the California Trail.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll jump in and get started. I wanted to do. I appreciate you guys coming down. I know that's a trip for you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. This is a podcast that we've been excited about. I know we've been pretty bullish talking about. I wanted to ask you about wording here in a minute about just the semantics of what you call a wild horse or a feral horse. So we'll get to that here in a second. But we appreciate you guys coming in. We have
Joel Blakeslee.
Joel Blakeslee, Jenny
Lesieutre.
Perfect. Gotcha. And you guys came via James Akers.
Yep.
So James reached out to me and he said, I have a couple individuals that I think you guys need to talk to. And so shout out to James for making this happen.
He's a great guy.
I appreciate that. Yeah. But I'm glad that you guys are here because it's something that we've we do a lot of bro science around here, the three of us.
It's the best science.
My kind of place.
It's undefeated.
We talk observationally of what we see when we're out on the landscape and stuff. So we wanted to get some people in that could actually talk about the topics. So we're basically going to talk wild horses and burros and give us, if you could, but just backgrounds.
Well, most people honestly really know about the federal program, and that's the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management's Wild Horse and Burro program. It's funny because it was signed in 1971 and one of the only acts that was ever put in place unanimously. I had the opportunity when I was in D.C. of speaking to a few of the folks that actually signed that act at the time, and at that time they all stated they never thought in a million years they'd be having to adopt horses or hold horses. So it was truly a feel-good act. If you think about 1971, that was probably one of the worst times in our history with the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And Wild Horse Annie came in with her fourth graders and made a plea to manage these horses. And really what folks have changed over the years is her biggest issue was never about management of the lands. It was about the transportation of animals. And so basically she was behind a trailer one time and blood was coming out of the back, and it was a bunch of Mustangers. They got everything they could and stuffed it in the trailer, and it was a dead foal in the trailer. So how it's been twisted over the years, I think, is sad. And it's really, at the end of the day, the sadness begins with our rangelands, mm-hmm. our wildlife, and now a species that there's no control over. Mm-hmm. And we're past the critical point. Mm-hmm. I think I sent you guys some numbers, and we don't need to really get into those, which we can over the history. But the rangelands for BLM and Forest Service can only manage in the multiple use way, wildlife, everything else out there, about 27,000 horses. And 2 years ago, there was almost 93,000. And when I keep saying just the BLM and Forest Service, but coming up this weekend, we've got a big Nevada Department of Ag meeting that they're going to be discussing horses. Right behind my house is a range that was zeroed out in the 80s. Now has anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 horses on it. So
what's the appropriate management level there?
Well, they agreed in 2000 to about 550 head. Truthfully, the range can probably support, with water and forage, no forage now, about 300 to 600. And you're talking, best case scenarios. Joel and I have noticed, there's no more deer out there. There's abundance of mountain lion now. And Joel can really speak on that predator side too.
Yeah, give me. But before we go, before we get too deep, I would give me some background on you guys' personal history. So your background on who you worked for, what you did, and then also Joel. I would be interested just what it is that you guys have. What do you do? What have you done?
He's got a better story than I do, so.
Just so I establish some.
I worked about 20 years. Following 9/11, I went to D.C. From Nevada. Worked about 20 years for the federal government. Came in, just was super lucky. Ended up working for a contractor, and then got brought in as a political appointee under the Bush administration. And then went on to work for the federal government and Bureau of Land Management, and basically have done a lot of the positions from legislation and background and budget in D.C. Ran as a state lead in Wyoming for the Wild Horse and Burro program, and ended my career just talking about it. You know, communications and marketing. So that's.
Gotcha.
Kind of my history. Before
Gotcha.
that, worked the private sector, worked a couple ranches, computers, everything.
Washington, D.C., and Africa, and all over. Tell them that stuff.
Okay, now you go.
Well, that's what you did.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I went to college in range management and wildlife management. I consider myself one of the top plant taxonomists in the West. I worked for the Forest Service in Utah and Nevada. I've mapped the Rubies, the Shell Creek Range, Mariah, Wheeler. I've ridden all those mountains horseback, and I decided to become a professional trapper. So I've trapped every county in Nevada except for Clark. I've trapped in 8 states professionally, and including I went there for a trip. I didn't do that for a living, but I've trapped in Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, California, Colorado, and so I've been around. I know a lot about predators. Trapped, thousands of animals, but I'm also a lobbyist. I'm probably I don't know of a lobbyist in Carson City that's been there longer than me. I've been there for the last 23 sessions, which is like 46 years now, and I've defended trapping for 17 of those sessions. And I've been involved in most all of the hunting and trapping, and we've pushed some laws forward. I'm a co-founder of the Nevada Coalition for Wildlife, which is the political arm for the sportsmen in this state, and I'm also the Southern Nevada Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife, which is like 19 organizations that were involved in it. So we've formed our legal stuff so that we can actually raise money and get involved in electioneering. We meet in the off years with all the politicians in the legislature, the assembly and the Senate and whatnot. We do campaign contributions and things like that, so we're extremely involved in the politics.
Gotcha.
So a lot of people probably don't know that there's that strong of a presence in Nevada, but I would say we're probably as strong as there is in the West. Now, Colorado really stepped up this year.
They did in a big way.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the last. I think this is going to just be a continual stand.
But
I think this is the new norm.
the thing that I'm kind of spearheading right now is we've got a deal called Readiness Summits, and it started out with the trappers. And basically what we're doing is training the leadership people in the different states, because most people don't understand the difference between the legislature and the Wildlife Commission. They don't know how to do it. I've been to Idaho, I've been to Texas, I've been to Louisiana, I've been to Wyoming. We had Nevada this year. We're going to Arizona next year. But I think that's one of the biggest contributions that I can put forward politically. Just training sportsmen, the people that want to be leaders, on how to do it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of guys don't go because they don't know what to do or what to say or who to say it to.
Yeah, there's not really a roadmap for that kind of thing.
Well, there is now.
There is now, it's becoming more clear for more folks.
That's my passion right now. And
Great.
Of course, the horse thing is totally important to sportsmen, and Jenny and I, work on that together. I know a lot about range management and whatnot, so I can talk about plants, soils, things like
Gotcha.
that. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I come from.
What I'm curious. So I don't know. Maybe I don't want to speak for you guys, but I'm curious as to like the actual history of wild horses and burros in the United States. So I know that the act, right, 70s. Prior to that, I mean, were they existing on the landscape and what numbers? I mean,
So a lot of, especially here in Nevada, I mean, I'm just going to say it. There's 10 western states under the federal act, the 1971 Free Roaming Act, that have horses in them. But over 50% of the horses are here in Nevada. So we're the epicenter. And really what occurred during that time, I mean, more than that, probably 98% of the herd management areas, there's 177 just in BLM alone. There's maybe 3 or 4 that actually have Spanish blood in them, and we're talking way down in them. So these horses are anything from, open range, cattle ranching, or horse ranching. They put their horses out on the land, especially in Wyoming and Nevada, open range. And then they gather them up in the spring, sort out what they want, and they utilize the land. So a lot of it is coming from that. And then, of course, the mining here in Nevada, that's where a lot of the burros came from because they were easier to get into the mines and transport things. Of course, the war. Once the war ended, they just let the horses loose. So you'll see in a lot of these areas where a lot of these horses have characteristics of like draft horses. A lot of that out there, especially in Oregon, you're seeing those larger size horses. Where in northern Nevada, around the ranches, you're seeing some real good quality horses. I picked up a horse out of Eureka, Nevada. He's considered a curly, and there was a guy there that bred curly horses, so he's almost like a golden doodle.
Tell them what a curly horse is.
Well, they basically are kind of hypoallergenic. They look wet all the time in the winter because they've got the tight curls. They're typically smaller horses. I mean, mine's a little runt, but he's built like a brick house. He climbs everything. There's been studies on the wild horse, and I'm putting that in quotes. Their hooves are different. They think the topography and different areas will
yeah, that's something you
change
always
that.
hear, right? People that adopt wild horses and they turn them into, riding stock, that they're somehow more suited, I
Yeah.
guess, to mountain climbing and, being able to get around, more sure-footed, if you will.
Yeah, well, and even we've noticed with horses that are in the higher altitudes, their nostrils are in different places. They're bigger, they're wider, just for whatever, could be the air or anything else. So, I mean, you'll see the structure based on the area that you're in. And a lot of people will pull hair and get samples, and you'll find so much of their backgrounds are really related to more the pony end.
Interesting.
The curlies were started in Siberia and brought to Ely, Nevada. That's where that particular horse came from.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixed bag then on the landscape, right,
It's
at this
a-
point?
Total misbag.
Huh.
I think the state named it right. They're stray horses. They're horses that have gotten loose over the years and everything else. So when the activists will call them Mustangs, they're not Mustangs. I mean, there's truly very little Spanish blood. Pryor Mountains in Wyoming, which is the only HMA in Wyoming, or I'm sorry, Montana, that has probably the most Spanish blood in them. And that herd is kind of considered where in the law it says, minimal feasible activity amongst all the other users. There's the Nellis Air Force Base and Pryor Mountains. That's kind of considered a horse range. Not distinguished to horses, but they're a higher priority. That's it.
Well, he asked about the semantics. What about
Yeah, that was the next-
strays
Yeah, that was
or,
going to be my next question.
or wild or,
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got a name for it. I mean, look, this is...
feral.
Yeah.
We've always called them feral here.
Well,
Absolutely.
and
I've been-
that irritates people. As a matter of fact, I just got in
Yesterday.
a little argument about that. But The BLM Forest Service, because of the act, they call them wild horses and wild burros. The state calls them, if you look at their codes of federal regulations and their policies, they're considered as stray horses. They were let go at ranches, or people let them go, and they continue to populate. Feral horses, and it's exactly, if you really think about it, it doesn't matter what you call them, but boy, you say it to the wrong person and they'll about cut your head off.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, when we've used the word wild horse or feral horse, so we've called them feral horses, we get a lot of comments from people saying thank you for calling them feral.
Right.
Yeah.
For what they are. So I don't. It's interesting to me. One of the questions I had for you was like, does the semantics matter moving forward? You know, is feral the proper term? I mean,
I don't care what you call them. There's too damn many of them.
And I have to agree with you. Know, it really comes down to that is if you look at social media like it is today.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through my career getting everything from death threats that were actually investigated by the higher ups in different organizations. That never scared me, and it still doesn't to this day. We just recently...
Try being a trapper.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of what I do. Or did.
Yeah, we're both trappers.
Yeah. You know, we're at a point now with these wild horses, feral horses, and stray horses, period, that nobody wants. We've got 66,000 horses that are living in what I call retirement homes in the Midwest and some really nice rangeland areas waiting to die. They're never going to see the range again. Nobody's ever going to adopt them. And we, as taxpayer dollars, are paying that. When I started the BLM in about 2005, our budget was about $38 million. Last year, the appropriations alone was $141 million. 2 years ago, they spent $157 million. So that's a lot of money.
Is that money just for horses that are in holding facilities?
It's a little bit of everything.
Okay.
The majority, about 68% of the Bureau of Land Management's budget goes to feeding horses that nobody wants.
Say that again?
About 68% of their annual budgets. Feeding horses. And you read the law.
I'm just going to let that sink in for a sec.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wild.
It's a lot of money. And so...
I know a couple of guys we need to talk to about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. You know, so there's so many other aspects. What the general public knows about horses is we gather them and we adopt them. But there's the intertwining of any bureaucracy. You know, they've got to go through planning stages, monitoring, compliance on adoptions that are going on. Gathering is really a minimal cost. In truth, it's probably about 7-8% of the budget that they use in gathering horses. It's lucrative. I mean, you know, it's not cheap to gather a horse. It can be anywhere from a couple $100 to $600, depending on the size of the gather. You know, these are private contractors that are doing it, and they're the ones paying the insurance. You know, a helicopter insurance on a helicopter, one per year, is about $1 million. So again, in social media, you're hearing, oh, these millionaire ranchers or these millionaire, you know, contractors doing this. The people that are in the business actually truly care not only about the animal, but mainly about the land and the resources. And, you know, that 8 pages of law speaks pretty clear about it. And yet you go through that, and today, basically, we're breaking the law. And it's Congress. It's not the BLM. BLM is mandated to do a job, or Forest Service is mandated to do the job. Congress is the one, you know, making the laws and putting in riders. And so for them to continue...
And funding it.
And funding it. It's a fight every year. You know, currently the biggest issue with the federally protected, if you want to say that, horses, is there's no more places to put them. 66,000 horses were in holding at the end of September.
Utah's entire elk population is about 78,000
There you go.
currently
For the state.
for the entire state of Utah. So it's, I mean, that just kind of, to me, puts it in perspective of how many, and that's not horses on the landscape. That's the number of horses we're
In holding.
currently in holding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the
that's-
old folks' home.
Yeah.
And think about this, you know, as a hunter, as an outdoors person, as anything goes, your animals are managed. Our animals are managed out on the ranges. With horses, they're out there 365 days a year. This, you want to compare it to cattle. A lot of groups love doing that. They're managed, and at times they're even paying allotments,
And there's pastures and they move them.
and they move them. Or they're told they can't utilize the pastures, whether it's drought, fire,
Yep.
stubble height, whatever. So basically, the horses are the only animal out there that, one, they don't have a resource value at this point.
Right.
And two, they're not being managed. They're being directed by the law to manage them, but the impossibilities are clear to us. You know, these aren't goldfish. You can't flush them down the toilet.
Yeah.
Let me speak a little bit to that.
I'd love it.
You know, the difference, you hear a lot about livestock versus horses. It's all about the season of use. And the phrase that I always try and get people to remember is one horse in March will do more damage than 100 cows in September. And the reason is in the high desert, the plants go dormant in the winter. So in the spring, when they start using their life force, which has been stored underground all year, to come up and produce vegetative photosynthetic leaves and stuff, a horse is on that, and that life force gets eaten back. The plant tries again, gets eaten back, tries again, it's dead. Now, a cow, you can put him there in the spring one year, and over here the next year, and over here the next year, and back over here the next year. So you're not hammering it every spring. You give those plants a chance to complete their life cycle, produce seed, and reproduce. When that plant goes back underground in the winter, I mean, you can graze it right off to the nubs because it's all underground. But that horse, one horse, will do more damage than 100 cows in the spring versus the fall.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just on the tail end of that? I don't know. As I was kind of prepping to have you guys on, and I've ran my mouth about horses. I actually don't know a ton about horses. Like, I don't know what a horse eats all the time. So a wild horse, a feral horse, on the landscape, are they just primarily eating grasses, forbs? Are they eating browse, like sagebrush, bitterbrush?
That's interesting. And, a horse is a grazer, pretty much. They like grass. And a cow's a grazer too. But a cow, if you manage them on a bitterbrush range, they can be extremely beneficial because a bitterbrush plant is a rose bush. Well, what do you do with your rose bushes? You prune them back to stimulate that growth. You have what's, I won't get into genotypes and phenotypes, but there's
Another podcast, perhaps.
Another day.
but anyway, a cow will graze a bitterbrush plant down, and it'll be hedged off like a hedged off brush in your yard. Well, it puts up leader growth, nice, tender, nutritious leader growth for deer and
That the deer love.
antelope and everything else. The horses will get in there in the winter, and they'll break those bitterbrush plants down and just stomp them out and destroy them with their hooves. So because they're in there in the wrong time of the year and they're trying to get whatever they can get. But you can use a cow the Sheldon Antelope Range, for instance, tremendous deer hunting up there back when they used to put cows on there. But they managed it to prune the rose bushes. That's, a lot of your browse species are rose bushes.
Yeah.
And if you work things right, you can really
Stimulate growth.
It's great for mule deer if you use it right and you manage it for that.
And basically, to just the average person, on an average, a horse will eat about 20 pounds of forage a day. And we're talking, they need that nutritional end of the forage, right? Cheatgrass isn't going to do it for them. Sagebrush that they're now eating because there's no grasses left isn't going to do it for them. So it'll fill their belly, but that's about it. And, depending on water, which is our biggest issue here in Nevada, we're talking minimum of 5 gallons of water a day to a maximum, in the heat of the summer, 15, 20 gallons of water.
Per horse.
Per day.
crazy.
Out on the range.
20 gallons?
It could. I mean, it's
Like a juniper tree.
high end.
Yeah,
But
legitimately.
about 10 gallons is really the average, is what they need to survive. They've got probably 100 feet of intestines in them, and the number one killer in horses is basically a stomach ache because horses can't throw up. So that's another big issue with the people out in the public is as they're coming closer and closer into residential areas, people are throwing out apples and carrots and things like that, and that's a system, their systems can't take it. So, going back just to the hunting side of that, and I've got documentation in here from that policy 67 on forage bases between elk and antelope and all that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is the overlap? Is it? Do you have a good sense of it as far as like competition for space, water, food?
Well, most people that don't have a trained eye, they don't know what the country should look like.
Yeah.
People that have studied it and been involved with it. I know what that range should look like. It should have needle and thread grass. It should have Indian rice grass. It should have blue bunch wheatgrass. It should have a diversity of browse, shrubs, grasses, and forbs. But when you see what is an overgrazed range, you either have where it's nothing but sagebrush or cheatgrass in the inner spaces.
Mm-hmm.
There's no perennial grasses left. So it's once you take the ice cream plants off the range, they're likely gone for decades. And the soils are another thing. Those springs that produce like 5 gallons of water every once in a while, you get those horses in there and they stomp and dig, and if it's in a clay layer, they'll actually stop the water, and all you have is mud. You don't have any free water anymore. So that compaction is really important. And then you get the head cutting and the big deep washes from overgrazing and stuff. So there's all kinds of things in there, but a good range should have a diversity of plants in it. It shouldn't just be
A monoculture.
exactly. Well, you're trained in that stuff,
Sure.
so you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I just think, I mean, we hear people all the time. You'll have elk herds that'll, increase, and then people come back and they talk about, mule deer and what's the interaction between mule deer and elk and how much competition is there for space and resource. And then, I think that's a complexity that I don't know that we entirely understand. We're still, researching, trying to figure that out exactly. But you add up on top of that something like, thousands of wild horses and burros. And
You want to know a relationship that we need to understand is the fact that the amount of horses we have increased the mountain lion populations to record numbers.
Interesting.
It's you've got that much protein base out there. There's not enough lions to control the horses.
And they're not.
But there's
really
enough
predators.
horses to prop the lions up. So,
Because they've eaten away everything for what the game for lions were.
So those poor deer, they prefer a deer.
Or antelope.
But when there's not any deer there, when one pops up, they wipe him out and then they go back to horses again. So the deer never get a chance in some of these places. The lions have just, they're using that protein source, and it's
exploded their population.
It has. It's incredible.
And the truth
how many
is-
lions there are in places.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
And the truth is, they're not a true predator of the horses. They're not going to control the population. Again, that's always been a big argument that, just put wolves or mountain lions out there and they're going to control the population. That's not the issue on public lands. Public lands issue is managing things in balance, right? And when you've got any grazing animal, I don't care what it is, out of balance, it's going to overtake everything, and that domino effect's going to happen. And we're beyond critical at this point. It's beyond critical.
And there's some things that, if we used it right, for instance, UNR did a study, and the lions have wiped the porcupines off of the Sierra front. They've basically made them extinct, everybody's concerned about sage grouse. What about the porcupines? I haven't seen a porcupine in 25 years, and there used to be millions of them, but there were no lions. Now there's a million lions and no porcupines. We get excited about sage grouse. Well, these predators are hard on sage grouse, and so are horses.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know,
I could see that.
That Endangered Species Act really should be used in this horse situation, in my opinion. You know.
Yeah.
Not for the horses,
No.
Let me be clear about
For
that.
the sage grouse.
because that's already been tried.
I want to ask you, so with the law being stated at what it is, right? And it's very clear what the law states. We've done a couple, content pieces on that and all that stuff. Where did it fall through the cracks that it is now being, propped up over and above what the law actually is? How did that happen? Like where in the dominoes is that being propped where that's not falling?
So we talk about the landlord issue out there. We've got 10 western states, and yet we've got 463 people in Congress, and you've got your senators and those kind of things.
Why would somebody in Rhode Island spend their political capital on horses in Nevada? It's public land, it's public horses, all 50 states own them. But people in the other states, there's no benefit to a politician in these other states to stick their neck out and say, let's kill horses.
And this is where we get in the political end of this. This is a big business for a lot of people that, I'm going to call activists. They claim to love the horses. They claim to be saving the horses from us gathering them in a brutal way, which is not a brutal way at all. And they make millions of dollars, and it's a handful of people.
I call them the donate now
The
button
donate
people.
now button people. You go to a website and you think you're going to get the truth about what's going on our landscapes, and you're sitting in New York City or Los Angeles and you got a bunch of money to spend. That's who they're going after, and they're spending a lot of time on Capitol Hill, and there's very few people on our end that's understanding, the complexities of this and what it's doing to our homes, why people move to Nevada, why people go to Wyoming or these small towns, because you love the lands, and you've got people in large cities that have never been out here, have never seen them, or might come and see one every once in a while. Now you can see them on the highways. 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, you had to travel out to see them, just like any other wild animal. So the biggest driver when it comes back down, sorry for that long elated response, is exactly that. It's the lobbyists out there, the different groups that people know these names, right and left, and no reason to put on there. The donate now buttons are spending a lot of money. They're litigating everything they can with the BLM. I can talk on that. There's only 2 cases in history that have actually formed opinions by judges, and one was a takings case right outside of Eureka, the Reverly Herd Management Area. They have to keep that HMA, which is kind of a smaller HMA, at appropriate management levels, because this rancher was able to prove, once it got overpopulated, that it was taking their water. It was just fine as long as it was at the appropriate management level or below it, but once it went over, they moved toward his water, and it was a takings case. And that is one of the only litigation cases that they have to stay on top of. Wyoming has another one, which was a consent decree. But let me go back to, so much of their money is being used on litigation they never win or haven't yet. And the hardest part about this is, and we go through it with the Wildlife Coalition constantly, they can continue to file suit after file suit after file suit. These groups, organizations, you screw up once, you're done. So the planning processes, everything else, it's a constant, get them in the office, don't get them out on the lands, make them write documents, and let's just hold this up. And they're going to D.C., and they're lobbying these senators that have the vote. We can sit here and talk about it all day long, but until we get someone in D.C. that understands the complexity and what it's doing, the damage it's doing to our environment itself, we're going to continue to lose battle.
Well, it's like when we formed the Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife in '92 in response to what happened in Arizona, and I won't go into that, but we were just citizen lobbyists. And it became apparent to me, and without going into a lot on politics, but there's three kinds of lobbyists. If you go in as a citizen lobbyist and you go talk to a legislator and you don't have a badge on, they say, "Where do you live?" And they say, "Your representative's down the hall in room 2105. If you go in and you got a light blue badge on, it's an unpaid lobbyist. They'll say, "What's your opinion on that bill?" And they'll say, "Okay, we'll relay your opinion to the senator." If you go in with a paid lobbyist badge, dark blue badge, they say, "Okay, could you meet at 2 or would 4 be better on Thursday?" So you get a different status there. Where we're getting beat in Washington, D.C. is we don't have any of the blue badges in Washington, D.C., and they do. We need to put some professionalism into this. We need to have some money for NDOW to lobby. We need a professional lobbyist that can actually go in there and walk the halls and sit in people's offices. You know, I always tell people, I say, emails are fine, but sitting here,
Yeah, face to face.
There's no replacement for that.
That's where you get it done.
Yeah.
And you got to talk politics. You know, there's three branches of government. There's executive, there's legislative, and there's judicial. So we just had a change in the executive, and I'm optimistic that we may have a chance for the first time in a long time to get something to happen on this. The legislative thing is just so big. There's 400 or 500, representatives.
Yeah.
The judicial part, we could sue for the law. And some of the sportsmen's groups are talking about doing that. Now, we could get a judgment, but then is Congress going to fund it? But you got to try. If I've heard one time how many times I was going to lose trapping, I've heard it 1,000 times, and I heard that I've been a dying breed for 70 years now, and we're not dead. So things can happen, but you got to show up. The world's run by those that show up, and we need somebody in Washington to show up.
Yeah.
Well,
Professionalism.
I've got, a great story on that, and that was the Slaughter Act got funded.
Yeah, can you take us back through like the act? So the original act, right? And you're kind enough. You you kind of marked it up, highlighted some things, and went through. I read it. As you go through that, what are the subsequent acts that came? And if you read the act itself, it looks like there's really no means, based on what I've read in the act itself, there's really no reason that we shouldn't be managing two objectives.
Well, that was the question that I was asking, and what it sounds like is you have the private gravy train, people making millions and millions of dollars. Then you also have the government side where these people don't want to stick their necks out because they're constituents of their state. It doesn't bother them. So why would they put their neck out?
And you got the bleeding hearts that every little girl growing up wanted a pony. I mean, again.
Well, and that's why you're saying, like, somebody in New Hampshire, why are they going to vote on, put their neck out?
If anything's going to happen, it needs to happen right here in this state.
Or the episode.
Because we've got, 60% of them?
47,000 just in BLM last year in March.
How many does Utah have?
I just need to pull that number right now. So every March they do population surveys, and they do it in a very.
But the point is, we've got so many more than any place else.
We've got over 50% of the wild horses currently in Nevada. And you were asking about laws. So remember earlier I said they never thought they were going to adopt horses or have to even gather horses, that, the Mustangers, there's probably 25,000 horses on the range in 1971 that in those herd management areas. Very clear. where horses were found in 1971. Then there was a 60-day claiming period for anybody with ranches in the open ranges to go and claim their animals. After that, they flew it again, drew circles of where they saw horses. That became your herd areas. So anything outside of that is not a herd management area. It's not protected. It's not under law. And Forest Service does the same thing with territories, just a little bit smaller. So long story short, as time went on, you've got NEPA, the National Environment Protection Act, and PRIA, the Public Lands or the Public Resource.
I think I wrote the first NEPA document for the
You
Forest
probably
Service in
did.
Nevada.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Grandpa. But so those acts, basically, if you look at the sideboards, there were no sideboards to the Wild Horse and Burro Act. It was a feel-good act, and nobody thought it was going to be one of those acts that were just under the wire. So PRI came in, gave them appropriations. They didn't have money to manage this, and all of a sudden, within 3 years, that population had doubled.
What's the reproductive rate on horses?
So they have a gestation cycle of 11 months, but what we're seeing now is horses as young as 2 years old are coming in pregnant. And that's another big, what are we doing? And then it takes 11 months to have them. They bring in a mare that's pregnant, they'll hold it in holding and not even offer it for adoption until that mare foals. Now,
Is that foal a wild horse?
right.
Yeah.
That
That's
foal's
a great
never
question.
going to see the land. It gets branded as a wild horse. It's protected under the law, everything else. And I would love to be sitting here with a veterinarian right now because I would tell you that 99% of the don't touch the wild horse people are just fine with aborting babies. But we're not doing that. And right there, when we're talking about, options and where do we start? Because look, we're past that point. We were almost there in 2007 at the appropriate management level across the United States. You're not going to be there all the time.
What is that number?
So about 27,000 combined for the 10 western states. In Nevada, for the BLM alone, it's about 12,811. Not about it is.
That sounds pretty specific.
12,000, you said, right, for the state of Nevada?
811.
Okay. So
And we have-
12,811.
Last March, I believe it was 47,000 that we had on the range. And I can pull that number again. But, I mean, all that information is online.
But
You
it
can
gets
find
exponential. It does this and then
Yeah.
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 what's the double? What's the half-life where, they'll double?
Well, so basically your herd size will double every 4 to 5 years. So if you do nothing, it will double within 4 to 5 years. And again, these aren't goldfish or fluffy-tailed rabbits out on the range. These are anywhere from 800 to 1,200 pound animals that are consuming 20 pounds of feed a day of forage that could be consumed by
in March, which makes it exponentially worse.
365 days a year. And when there's no more grass out there, they're eating the bushes, they're eating the forage, they're eating, the sagebrush, the
dirt.
cover for sage hens. There's great pictures I've got of just a bird nesting area.
And those damages are decades, if not
Yeah.
centuries, at certain elevations. Above 7,000 feet, everything repairs itself quickly because of the precipitation. But you get down on your toe slopes and your benches and your valleys, some of that we'll never see that in our lifetimes.
Yeah, come back.
For the average person, think about this. We think, the California Trail is the coolest thing because you can still see the ruts from the wagons that came across 200 years ago. So if you get that in your mind and realize that there's so much in Nevada that's already decimated to the point it will never come back.
Well, I won't say never.
There's areas that
but we
we've
got to
already
start.
seen.
I mean, we are where we are.
Probably not without some manipulation, right?
Yeah.
Of the landscape and the ground.
Yeah.
How do they decide? So So you have a herd management unit, right? Like a herd, and you have a population. You said they monitor them they count them every March.
And March 1st of every year, they do the
Okay.
public land stats.
Okay.
So it's an official number. They do it by using helicopters or airplanes, sorry. And they'll fly. There's several different units, but they work with USGS that has come out with these flights. The double count, simultaneous double count is the main flights that they'll use. They'll look at those areas and look about 5 miles outside of the herd management areas and count those as well.
Okay.
What that number does not include is any foals born that year. So you figure about 20% of those numbers that you see, again, are open to the public on site, on the BLM site. By July, at least, start adding 20% to those numbers, and that's going to be your realistic count. And again, it's an estimated population, just like wildlife. You've got an estimated population. These are done through very scientific
You have a model?
reviews. The modeling, they review them. It takes several months to get it up online, but it's pretty accurate. And actually, there was a study in 2013 by the National Academy of Science that basically states that we undercount.
Sure.
You can't find every animal. If
Yeah.
one's out there, there's 100 out there. So
Yeah. What? So we have a population. It's growing. Like it's exploding.
Exploding.
It's exploding. What is the history of means of actually dealing with that to try to maintain some sort of objective? What did we ever use lethal means of removing horses? Have we ever? Has it only been capture, and then what is that process? Capture, adoption. What does that look like? How many horses actually get adopted, and how? And there's a lot in that question, but
but it's a frustrating question.
It's a good
because
question, though.
It's a great question because Congress currently they haven't changed the law, and I think it's not humorous. It's ironic. They're not changing the law because the law was basically well written, and it's not you might. It's you shall. You shall get them down to appropriate management levels. Well, we're breaking the law because there's, in Nevada alone, I think of the 83 herd management areas, there's probably 17 that are at appropriate management levels. So right there, we're breaking the law. It also states under 1333 section that basically the secretary shall, and I'm going to read this to you. So it states the secretary shall cause additional excess wild free roaming horses and burros for which an adoption demand by qualified individuals does not exist. So if it does not exist, they're to be destroyed in the most humane and cost efficient manner. Are we doing that? Law number 2's broke. So then, one of the amendments to the act, again by the Donate Now people, was these horses were going to slaughter, right? So the same year that they were able to convince Congress to ban slaughter of wild horse meat, and they didn't ban slaughter. That's a misconception people have. What they did was told Department of Agriculture they could not use federal funds to inspect the horse meat, therefore it's gone. You can't sell any kind of meat without inspections. You can't transfer it, you can't do anything else. So
Dog food.
you still got to inspect it now here in the United States.
Yeah, okay.
So 3 slaughter plants were closed, and I was in D.C. at this time. A good friend of mine worked for a congressman, spent a year studying this. As he's walking into the chambers, she said, okay, we're on point. This is a horrible act, the Slaughter Act. This is horrible. There's going to be unintended consequences on animals across the United States. We're clear on this, right? Yep, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell them I'm not voting to close down slaughter plants. Goes in there, votes yay to close down the slaughter plants. And literally, I was in the halls of Congress. He came walking out there. My friend lost it. I just wasted a year. how dare you on this? This is going to be on your head. And he said exactly what Joel just said. He said, I got 500,000 letters from people across the United States saying close down plants. I probably got 5,000 compared to the 500 that said don't do it. So again, it goes back to that vote.
Political cover.
It's political coverage. And nobody, most humans, they've got the boxes on. They're not seeing the damage to the land. You can show it to them. I mean, I can remember picking up horses in Wyoming where there was no food out there in Medicine Bow. They had 15 horses that were skin and bones. The only water source was full of horse shit. Disgusting. And literally, I'm looking in this woman's eyes, and she couldn't see the inhumane treatment that was going on. So people can't focus to talk about horses starving to death. It could take a year for them to starve to death. 24, 48 hours to die of thirst. It's the most inhumane manner of death I can speak of. I've seen horses, well, we've seen it in springs across Nevada. There's horse skeletons in the spring because they're going to pick the water before the food. And they will literally lay there for days on end until they finally die. If that was in my backyard, I'd be hauled off to jail with a federal offense of inhumane treatment to horses.
Absolutely.
So, getting back to this, who are the people that are really seeing the truth out on the range? And that's folks like you that love our ranges, love hunting, want to put food in the freezer that's been untouched by anything, hasn't been processed. And, in some cases, that's the only food people are going to see in their freezers.
Well, we're the ones that fund the wildlife.
Right.
Yeah.
The state wildlife.
Yep.
And so more and more, we're finally seeing folks that are evening out that playing field instead of,
This is starting to gather momentum. 4 or 5 years ago, it just white weather. But I can see, I'm cautiously optimistic that there may be some movement here. I think the time is right. And,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been interesting. So if we looked at like the example with Colorado on the Prop 127 and the potential ban, lion hunting, it's interesting. A state like Colorado, we've brought it up a bunch of times. I mean, that state went blue completely as far as votes, right? But they still had enough sense.
Yeah.
You could still get a grassroots effort together. You could still talk to people, and you could speak logic. And saying this is the reason that this law is a bad idea. You should have mountain lion. You should manage that population. And to me, it feels like, at least, kind of from the outside looking in, now much more from the inside because I've got more of a voice here at the mic. But it seems like we're a lot more organized than we've ever been. To me, anyway, it feels like there's a head of steam building, and I think that was a big win. But I think this is a giant issue that I hope we can make some headway on. And I mean that was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to have you on today, because I just wanted people to hear, the issue as a whole, and then also, how can we push it forward?
I'm going to say, back in 2007, I met weekly with the Secretary of Interior, and we talked just horses every Friday. But because, again, that emotional end of it, and I was brought in there for political coverage for both the director of the BLM and the secretary to do the right things. And back then we were saying we were at the critical point because we were actually real near appropriate management levels. Today, we're beyond the critical point. Nobody wants to be a senator or director or anybody else that's going to have their name tagged as being the one that killed horses. Senator Burns did that with amending the act.
The crazy thing is there are horses dying, though, from far less humane they're dying of thirst. They're dying from malnutrition. They're completely nuking the landscape for the remainder of other wildlife that are on the landscape.
I'll tell you something about politicians, though, and I know a lot about them. I mean, I've interviewed like 30 of them this summer. Most of them don't even know we hunt. Honest to God.
Like at all?
Not at all. In our state assembly and senators. I mean, it was health care and welfare. That's what their interests were. You know, it's everybody thinks the whole world's against us. Most of the world doesn't even know we do anything. It's they're not against us. Most of them are actually, the minute I tell them that we're paying for it, they're actually very supportive of us.
But you got the numbers of the dollars. You guys have the numbers of the dollars that hunting brings to our state.
Oh, yeah.
Politicians respond to three things. They respond to voting blocks, money, and political cover. You know, you've got to give them the cover to vote the way. Don't ever make them be the swing vote, where they have to stick their neck out. Tell them, you know, I got enough votes, but you know, you'll help me out here. You know, don't ever make them have to go out
Kill
on a
it
limb
in
for
committee.
you.
Yeah.
And you know, it's, you know, you talk politics to politicians, biology.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just not interested in it. But voting blocks, money, and political cover, that's what motivates politicians.
Well, and let me kind of, and I want you to jump in on this too, is we are at the stage today where it is beyond critical. We don't have space in holding anymore. We've 2 years ago, we gathered almost 20,000 horses in 1 year to try to move that number down to an appropriate management level, still 3 times over, okay? We could barely gather 20,000 horses with our contractor and the staff and the timing, because we don't gather during foaling season, which is March 1st to July 1st. So we're out there, I don't care if it's Christmas, Thanksgiving, it's 15-hour days, it's just like trapping, it's just like hunting. You're out there, you've got a job to do, and we're gonna do it in the most humane manner. But now we have no place to put these animals. Our facilities are full, and we're talking 48 pastures in the Midwest.
What does a pasture look like? What is that? Is it literally like I'm imagining just an open pasture and you've
exactly a free roaming state? It is tested. You know,
Is it
once a contract goes into place.
so it's fenced?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's got to be fenced. They separate by sex, so it's all mares or all geldings, because that's the only thing we're doing is gelding stallions. We're not, you know, trying to. They're using fertility control, which is, to me, almost inhumane when you're overpopulated, putting horses back out on the range, shooting them with fertility control. It's, again, the donate now button people saying, you know, this will help control the population. It's not going to change the number, it just slows population growth by maybe a year or two on what we've got today.
Are they're feeding on these lots? Feeding?
Well, in many cases, most of it is free roaming up until the winter time, and then they're paying for hay. So every contract is a little bit different. The pastures are a lot cheaper, but we're talking 500,000 acres to 1 million acres, and it depends on the quality of the feed and those things.
Is it private?
Private land.
So those are private lands.
Yep.
That I'm assuming we're paying for, right?
That's exactly that comes. That 68% is going to, and so be it. Private contractors,
Sure.
it's a good business, but it's not a cheap business.
What's it cost for one horse?
So anywhere on pastures, and because there's 2 separate, on off-range or pastures and corrals. So in corrals, you've got to vaccinate them. You've got to do their feed because they're not roaming naturally, and then the feed. So in a corral, it's anywhere from, I'm going to say, $5.50 a day on up to possibly $13 a day. Again, each contract is determined differently by size of animals, holding capacity. Pasture, it's anywhere from probably $2.30 a day, maybe to $5. Again, size. You know, if they can hold 1,000 horses, which in the mid-2000s, we wouldn't even do a contract for less than 1,000 horses. We've got pastures that have a couple hundred on it. Well, that's 1 day of a gather in Nevada. So we are beyond what Congress and the Act is allowing us to do. They also amended the Act saying, oh, by the way, the only way to move horses is through adoption or the Burns Amendment sale. We rarely sell a horse. It's over the age of 10, and when we say sale, if you adopt a horse from the federal government, the government holds the title for a year. At the end of the year, you can apply for the title, just like if you're buying a car. apply for the title. It's checked out to make sure that it was humanely taken care of, and at that point they sign off title. So if anybody thinks they can make a living holding a horse for a year and then driving it down to Mexico or Canada and sell it for slaughter and think they're going to make any money on it, that's ludicrous. But these Donate Now people went to Congress, and they're still fighting it in social media, saying all these horses are going to slaughter. Have private-owned horses that are branded huge on the neck gone to slaughter? Yes, but not many. I had to do a report quarterly in D.C. of how many wild horses went to slaughter plants. Number one, none of them were untitled. And number two, it was less than 2%. So that just killed your private market of horses right there. But going back to it, now Congress has also said you can only adopt 4 animals per year under your name. And you can only have 4 animals untitled on your property at once. So now there's a limitation.
The only means of management is adoption, but you can only adopt up to 4, and you can only have up to 4 that are untitled, right?
Right.
So a total of 8.
Right.
And that's it.
Well, the adopted horse is untitled for a year.
Yeah,
So,
but I mean, there's not enough.
no.
I'm just doing. I'm terrible at math.
Yeah.
But even I can see this one.
And it's just trying to be that simple. Is the law is there. It got amended in 2008 with what people call the Burns Amendment. That was the sale authority. Any horse over the age of 10 or has been offered for adoption 3 times, where it's a qualified adoption, can now be sold directly. But there's also limitation on how many you can buy, and they make them sign a piece of paper that says, I'm not going to use it for commercial use. The secretary, but it's so long drawn out, does have the ability to state, Matt Zimmerman, you're a storefront, you can go pick up 60 horses because we know you're going to adopt them all, or you're going to have a show where people are going to adopt them. Mustang champions, those groups.
The prison stuff, but that's a drop
minimal.
in the bucket.
Well, it's not even the prison stuff. That's a
I'm
whole different.
I'm just saying that's another one.
Yeah. So untouched horses. Nobody in their right mind. I'm a horse owner. I don't want a horse over the age of 5 that nobody's ever touched, much less one that's been on the range that doesn't even know humans. I'll tell you, they're the greatest horses once you're able to get your hands on them, but there's also a lot that will never be tamed, are dangerous, will kill you. I've seen video after video of people ending up in emergency rooms because they didn't know what they were doing.
I had a mare, she bit me right here.
That's what's wrong with your ways. But, the limitations at this point is beyond. And what I'm seeing next year, like right now, is that we're only going to be able to gather so many horses because there's no place to put them. And until we start getting into areas and thinking about why aren't we aborting mares that are in their early stages with 1 shot? Why aren't we doing that? That's a question I've always had. And it goes back to the humane side of it. You still got to have people doing it, or they got to clean up the corrals every morning because these Donate Now buttons are going to take pictures of us killing horses. We put them down on gathers, and it's all over social media. BLM killed 27 horses on this gather. Doesn't say we gathered 2,200. Doesn't say that. And there's 2 ways of distinguishing. If they died because of the gather operation, and if you guys know anything, we've got the lowest. It's less than 2% of deaths during gather operations. It's low compared to studies on wildlife. Extremely low. So we've got acute deaths for gathers, or we have putting animals down as an act of mercy. twisted legs, broken backs that healed wrong. We came across a horse, blind, that is dangerous to them and humans. I came on a gather up in the Owahis. Horse came in, and we're looking at him to try to age him, and his forelock, the front hair, kept flying up. But it was like in cadence. Looked at him, he had a hole the size of basically probably a baseball in the middle of his forehead, likely through a fight with another stud. And obviously that's something we're going to put down.
Yeah.
So instead, the Donate Now buttons, we'll just plaster it. They've got media on their side. We're working with media quite a bit. And plaster it. We killed this many horses.
Yeah, we just did a documentary on, so.
Yeah. Just finishing up a documentary.
The leadership on this to get something done is probably going to have to come from the ranchers and the sportsmen, because we have the vested interest. The general public's not going to care about it. So.
Yeah, I bring it up again in Colorado, but you had all these people in the middle, these independents, right, that didn't really know anything about mountain lion hunting, but it felt like we were able to connect with them, educate, talk to them on a level like, hey, this is why this is important.
It was a Herculean effort by Dan Gates.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think this is going to be that much and more probably, but
it takes a leader like that to do it.
Yeah, but it just goes to show you that you can logic with people. You can talk to people. You can help them understand. Like, look, we're not against wild horses and burros. I'm not. I
don't want to see them starve to death.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a bunch in the times that we've talked, but what is the more humane thing? If you love this animal so much, what is the more humane thing? Is it removing them lethally from the landscape rather than letting them starve to death or die of thirst?
It comes down to what kind of a value do you put on them. If you ask me, I'm a native plant enthusiast. One Indian ricegrass plant has more value to me than a wild horse.
Yeah, and I talk about that a lot. What do you value?
Yeah.
Your value and my value can be different things. It doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong, or you're
just
wrong and I'm
different.
right. Yeah, it just means that there's different. And that's the thing about politics and land management and wildlife management and everything, is you have to take it from collective. You have to look at it at a much larger scale. You can't look at it. You can't manage for one species like wild horses. You can't just let them blow up on the landscape, or else everything else is going to suffer.
Everything else goes.
Everything else will fall off. You have to manage it. Just like you have to manage lions in Colorado. And this doesn't seem to me like, it's not rocket science by any means, but it does take.
It's daunting. It's like the lion thing in Colorado. By God, they got it done, didn't they?
Yeah.
Good for them. That was huge.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
was just huge.
The fact that this one's federally protected, though, is the scary part, or the nerve-wracking part.
It is, but somebody's stopping it. And it's a small group of people that are making a lot of money off of it. In one of the bigger groups, their donations increased by $2 million in 1 year.
They have professional lobbyists, and if we're going to compete, we have to have professional lobbyists.
But it does help. We are getting the message out.
We've
been working
Look at this,
on it.
right? This is awesome.
And so
I'm so happy and thankful for you
We're
guys.
happy you're here.
Yeah.
Good.
But we need folks that have the boots on the ground, taking the pictures, send them to the appropriate person, whether it's their local legislation person or Congress. Start taking notice on social media, pages.
Our congressmen are Mark Amaday, Dina Titus,
Cortez Masto for senator.
Cortez Mastos, Susie Lee, Jackie Rosen.
Yep.
Those are the people in Nevada that can do something about this. They're the ones with the votes. Like I tell the people in these summits that I do, I say I don't focus on trying to get all the soccer moms because they care about soccer. I said I'm interested in the people that have a vote. That's who you have to get to.
The interesting thing is as you go through the law, if you read through the actual act itself, it doesn't seem to me that it's anything that anybody would propose to get those two objective is outside the law. It's included in the law.
Well,
You read down through it. There's all kinds of language in it that speaks to how this should be managed.
Yeah. And it's shall, not might.
Shall. And that's I mean, that's the interesting thing. As I read down through it, as I was kind of prepping for this, it's not, and that's the thing that's interesting. So for me, I've always been told whenever somebody asks, what can be done about it? Well, everybody just tells you nothing can be done. There's nothing that you can do. There's just nothing that you can do. And I figured it was, and I've never read the act myself until recently. Thank you. I've never actually read it, but as I read down through this, I'm thinking, why can't something be done?
It's clear language, isn't it?
It's clear as a bell.
Right. Eight whole pages long and very direct.
Yeah, it does not seem to me that there's anything that...
No ambiguity in there.
Yeah, there's no ambiguity. Yeah, well said. And really, the only thing I guess that would be holding up is litigation from groups like you've said.
It's litigation, and there's, and I don't. I need to look back into it. I think Congress already passed it. It's called, and they fall. They'll sneak in these little bills because there's hundreds of them, right? There's one called the SAFE Act. Mm-hmm. It's yet another bill that the activists are trying to get through, basically saying you can't transport horses across the United States borders with the purpose of slaughter. Well, that's already been put in place pretty much, right? So what they're trying to use that for, and I've read a lot of these people's big plans and everything else back in the days. They've got it set up. What's the next thing we're going to attack on? We're okay with euthanizing, but we're not okay with euthanizing. It just keeps rolling. Take. So long story short, if SAFE goes through, then what's going to happen, because I know these groups, I know these people, these are the ones I've gotten death threats from. They will sit there in turn and say, well, we're going to follow this trailer down, this $100,000 horse down to the border that they're probably selling as a reining horse to somebody else, and they're going to say they can't transport that horse outside of the country. They're gonna it could end up in slaughter. Mm-hmm. So now, on top of the wild horse issue, now you're not going to have any way to move any horses in the United States, and all of those businesses are going to go down the drain. You're not going to see cutting horses. They're already attacking rodeo. We've got the national finals going on right now. They're already attacking that in Los Angeles. We've got one lobbyist down there that's been able to stop it over and over. And then we, in Nevada, stopped the group, and I'm looking at Joel because it was his group that helped have that conversation, because these activists wanted wild horses in Nevada to be the animal for Nevada.
The state horse.
The
that
state
was in the
horse.
Legislature last time.
Which is,
Are you kidding me?
No.
Got defeated.
It got defeated.
They had a bunch of sixth graders or something that the wild horse activists decided to do this, and it didn't work.
104 students were taken out of their regular classes for 2 weeks and had lobbyists from like the Humane Society, American Wild Horse Campaign, those all lobbyists coming in, doing presentations to these fourth graders.
Oh, I know these fourth graders hired these high-powered lobbyists. It was amazing.
It's incredible. They knew who to reach out to. Wow.
Real savvy.
But the best part is I think there was 33 kids out of those 144 that actually wrote a letter. But do you think our legislation knew that there was 140 or 104 kids being driven down by this? We were able to sneak in at the last minute and say, here's the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't even talk. I just thought, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's like 11 PhDs here. I'll just kick back and take it easy today,
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
But it was a lot of work. These people, they don't care about the horses. 90% of these people that have the donate now button probably don't even own a horse.
Oh, of course. No way.
I mean,
Well, yeah, they do. They own all the ones out on the range, just like we do,
Yeah, there's no chance that they own horses.
well, and currently here in Nevada, I mentioned this Friday,
Yeah.
You know, obviously it'll be past the time that goes on, but the Department of Ag also has authority over what we call stray horses that aren't protected under the federal law. You know, we're mainly talking about BLM because that's the main numbers, but we're talking 4,000 to 6,000. They need to do an official count, and I believe that they're planning on doing that. But the estimation is about 4,000 out on that range that we talked earlier that could support 300 to 600. And we're seeing movement, and we're seeing movement by hunting groups on social media. Will be testifying.
I can feel this starting to gather momentum. You know, like you guys say. I mean, you go on Nevada Big Game Hunters on Facebook, and what everybody's saying, I don't see any deer, but all I see was horses. I mean, you see that just constantly.
I wanted to ask you, what is the NDOW's involvement with
The Wildlife Commission is very supportive of this, but here again, they're the state agency. They write letters, and NDOW, you know, the biologists, they'll give you the biology and stuff, but we need to get them sitting in Washington, D.C. doing this, or a lobbyist representing them, or representing the hunters, or representing the ranchers, or
Understands the
or all
politics
of the
it.
above.
Do they put out any kind of report, statement, anything
Letters.
like that? On
Well,
letters?
and now just updated their
Tell them about
Policy
Policy
67.
67. Yeah, tell them about that.
a gal and the head of their group, they were supposed to do a report on a regular basis, and they hadn't really done it. And now again at this critical stage, all of a sudden they're like, uh-oh. So just, I don't know,
Just last week. Yeah.
For about 6 months, a gal that came to NDOW used to work in BLM. Great scientist. I mean, she's got a PhD more on the riparian water side, but gets it, was out on the ground. Updated this and really went through, you know, the consumption out on the range and how these horses are affecting the natural wildlife that's out there, and did an excellent job. And so now their aha moment, but who manages those state horses are the Department of Ag. And they're on it too, because the amount of horses getting hit in residential areas, the amount of horses that are sitting at our Carson City dump up north, they love trash day. They're like bears now.
You brought in some photos. Can you?
It's wild.
Yeah, and can you explain it? What is it like? How many?
I live in an area that's, to me, critical when it comes to wildlife, and that is a small area called Washoe Park. It's actually
State
Washoe
Park.
State Park. It's right in between Reno and Carson City. 2016, you might have seen what I call a small band of 5 to 7 horses out in what is a designated bird nesting area that people can't even walk in from August 15th until February 15th. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah.
I've got pictures of that.
It's so fragile that we can't walk in there.
So
but
fragile, a human
Because
can't
that's
walk
when they're
in it.
nesting, when the birds are actually nesting.
Yeah, waterfowl.
But
Yeah.
there is now at least 200 to 300 horses sitting on that area that used to be covered in, it was pristine.
I looked at it from the air on the way down here this morning, and you can see it. It's, you know, from the air.
Pristine,
Yeah.
pure, it's nearly dirt. There's not a bush out there, there's no more,
Well, and the beavers have eaten all the trees down, so they got that
right,
going too.
that too. But it literally looks like a dirt lot that horses are sitting on. So, you know, I actually noticed it this year. I'm going to go back. They did not start inhabiting that area until probably between 2016 and 2018. So we're talking what took 3 decades to get pristine, took about 5 years
To ruin.
to destroy.
But those
Not
are
her.
state horses, and the state
Yeah.
can do something about them.
They can.
Like the Sheldon Antelope Refuge,
Yeah.
they took them all off of there because that was the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah.
The Indian reservations can do something about this. So there are entities that actually will do something,
Yeah.
but unfortunately the BLM's the biggest. And
And in this area, I mean, they're still pussyfooting with the, we don't want to piss them off too much. And them being the activists that want to take their camera, and now they can go right off of Interstate 580 and see them. The wild horses, as they call it, or Mustangs. They were never there.
Yeah.
They've encroached because there's nothing else on that Virginia range, which is about 208,000 acres, and has about 4,000 horses on it. So the biggest thing I noticed this year was I always knew when it was hunting season, duck season,
Yeah.
because that's the minute that sun came over the mountain, you'd hear the gunshots going off, and people enjoyed it. They utilized the birds, everything else. I don't think I heard one gunshot go off this year because they're gone. They had 230, I believe, species of birds in there. I could ride my horse out on that lake and see bald eagles. They're gone. Now I have to carry something with me because now we've got horses, stray horses, out on the lake where there never were any.
Yeah.
So it's the encroachment on it, and then just, I'm going to call them lies, but misinformation. Oh, they were here before us. They weren't here before us. I've got the documentation because it was my backyard. It was why I moved there. It was why I paid twice as much for a home to be there.
There's not a horse alive right now that was born before me.
I can't even answer
Now, you
that.
said that was waterfowl nesting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're federally protected too.
Yeah.
So like, what takes precedence?
exactly.
Well,
So-
it's, we're talking about laws. I mean, it's illegal to cross the border,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
does that
No,
matter?
hasn't been in the
It's-
past.
It's the same kind of thing here,
Yeah. This picture, it is wild. This picture is so wild.
Well,
Nah.
Friday, they're gonna have a big meeting right here. We're staying down for it.
Yeah.
And so their project is going to be fencing off that area, getting them back, going to take them off the range is what my understanding is. We'll see in the presentation. But fencing the area, which these horses are going to break through, people are going to cut the fence, etc.
You're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And BLM's been doing this for 53 years now, almost 54. And we've already proven this doesn't work, but there's still that, frightenedness of it. The difference today is that there's a lot more people behind them. And I think we're going to see that on Friday, and that's my hope. But
We've got a good governor.
yeah, we've got a good governor and stuff, but I'm also talking about just the people, us paying taxes. Most of us work for a living. Most of the people out there are probably my age, in that age category.
Youngster.
It's I wish hobbyists. That probably can't afford a horse their own, but they don't see it as wildlife yet. Oh my gosh, this horse would rather be free, than be kept up. Well, I'll tell you, with my horse that was on the range for 3 years, working it to work a cattle drive, came across a band of horses, and he
like
looked
the
at
difference from
them.
being a homeless or
Yeah.
being put up in a nice hotel,
Yeah.
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 There's definitely a choice.
Yeah.
Those horses don't have any concept of wild and free, It's,
Yeah.
Trust me, my horse isn't running away when I leave the gate open. He's coming right back.
horses respond to safety and
Sure.
food.
Like anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
like an
difference
ant-
between predator and prey animals.
Yeah.
Predators respond to praise and recognition, and horses respond to safety. That's why their eyes are on the side of their head,
Yeah.
because they're watching their.
Well, no.
and predators are binocular. But
And I'm going to say this, and this is where we laugh together because we're a little bit different in that idea. One, it's not the horse's fault.
No.
This is the fault of those activists that are allowing these animals to be in extreme, inhumane areas at this point. This is on them. They're not lovers of horses, or I feel bad for the people that have been sucked in by these donate now buttons, because I do believe their heart's in the right spot and they're reading misinformation. So what we're trying to do on social media is educate them. I'm at a point where I used to be like, oh my gosh, I saw a horse out there on Little Washoe Lake up Northmore, maybe once every couple weeks. Now I drive past every day and see hundreds of horses, and I, as a horse owner and horse lover, I'm pissed. I mean, it's not like, oh, this is bad. I'm pissed. Thanksgiving night, a woman coming around corners, not going beyond 35, hit a horse, totaled her car, had to be extracted because she was trapped in there by a friend of mine that was there. Called the people that are helping the state. He had to shoot the horse. Had to teach these people that are part of this wild or advocacy group how to remove the horse from the road. And then they turn around and put pictures of it on next door in social media. And what are these people doing? They're blaming the human. Well, if you had slowed down, you'd see the horse.
Tell you something to Google. It's a thing called the tragedy of the commons.
I don't even know where you're going with this, but I love the start. Here's something to Google. I'm going to remember that.
Tragedy of the commons. Read that. That's the issue we have here.
Yeah.
We all own it, and it's like my little ranch in Idaho with my brother and sisters and cousins. You know, I want to sell my part, but they won't let me because it's a corporation. You know, there's too many landlords. You know, what we've got on our public lands, unfortunately, is a tenement that's half burned down and infested with rats. It's an analogy.
Yeah.
We don't. Our property managers aren't funded or allowed to manage the property correctly.
Yeah.
And that's.
We need the people with the votes to finally. They're at that point. They have to make that hard decision. I particularly, where Joel's going to disagree, I don't think we need to go out and kill every horse out there. But unfortunately, we are at the point like Australia is. Australia is literally flying over groups of horses and shooting them out of helicopters. I don't think we need to get to that point, but we're right there. We're beyond that point in truth. And if we don't save our lands, then there's not going to be anything out there.
Yeah.
And horses are kind of like cockroaches.
To that point, though, and us being more than triple over capacity, what else do you do if you don't fly over in helicopters and kill them?
Right.
What else is there to do?
If they
We're
want
out
to
of
continue,
holding pens, we're out of space, we're out of all this stuff, so what else is there to do?
Yeah, we've gotten to the place where I guess we just let them ruin everything and die, you know, destroy the range for the next 3 centuries.
But then all the other animals die too.
Exactly. And that is the point. If we don't educate on if there's no land and no water, then nothing lives. And there are places to start, because look, it's not going to happen overnight, and nobody in the United States is going to agree to fly helicopters over groups and shoot them. We know that. Not that it can't be done, but currently there's
you look at Texas,
limits.
they don't have a wild horse problem in Texas. They have a pig problem, but what do they do with pigs?
What do they do with those? Exactly.
But I don't know any little girl growing up that said, I want a pig for Christmas.
Very true.
A couple of them in the rural areas.
Yeah.
This is the other thing I always find entertaining as well, is like all the imagery they show of feral horses. Just the most beautiful, well put together horses you could
Fat,
possibly imagine.
And then
that's
look
what
at those
all the
pictures.
public thinks of when
Yep.
they think of a feral horse. I can take you to a place I used to hunt in Nevada, and they are the mangiest, dirtiest, nastiest looking horses I've ever seen. And that I actually thought your analogy was really good in the beginning of this, that if you treated the horses that you own, if you treated them like these wild horses are being treated, or mismanaged, if you mismanaged your owned horses the same way, you'd be going to prison.
Yep.
Yep. It's a
Like,
federal
they
offense.
are literally dying in plain sight, like where I was hunting in Nevada before they completely took over. Now there's no animals to go after in the first place. But when I was out there, they were literally dying right in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they looked like they were days away from dying. And it was a very common thing to see the horses look like that.
That ain't pretty.
It's not pretty.
And 9 times.
But all the imagery looks like
Yep.
this.
Yep.
This is what all the feral horse imagery
And
looks
that was
like.
Endow's report. So.
I mean,
you
those
know
are the
exactly.
healthiest looking horses I've ever seen.
That'd be a good backstrap off that one.
You know, actually, I'm happy you said that, because I wanted to get into this. And I don't know if you guys know more of the history about this with horses than we do, but We talked about it on the podcast, a month, 2 ago, about horse meat.
A month ago. Mm-hmm.
Horse meat internationally is like a very recognized thing as a very good piece of meat for human
Higher
consumption.
protein, less fat.
All kinds of things.
Yep.
Like it is, there's a lot of countries that hold it in like the highest regard over anything else, beef or anything. France eats it. They're, as far as we know from the outside looking in, they're pretty leftist and pretty progressive, so to speak.
I'll tell you.
Switzerland
right.
still eats it. Like some very...
The Asian countries are the biggest consumers. When the Slaughter Act was not out of place here in the United States, they were the highest consumers to export horse meat from the United States. Not wild horse meat. It was domestic horses, etc. Because they knew that they were inspected. It was clean meat and highest level. I adopted 5 horses to a guy in Austria, and he's come over several times, him and his wife, and we're sitting there talking about just that. We figured it was about $27,000 per horse to get it to Germany. They want them. But these activists are saying, don't let it happen because you got to keep it in the United States for a year.
Well, where did that culture come from here in the U.S. that we don't eat horses, or you're not supposed to eat?
Right from here, right here in Nevada.
Literally everywhere else.
John Ensign.
Is that what it was? That's what I would love to understand the history of that, because internationally, some very progressed, very high intelligent countries.
Think about the humanitarian effort.
United States Senator from Nevada, John Ensign.
That's where it started.
Yep. But think about this as a humanitarian effort to the poorest countries in the world. We're sending billions of dollars that don't get to those people. We could literally ship 100 horses, work with government groups like World Bank, IMF, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, set up a slaughter plant, teach them how to do it humanely and effectively, like Canada does. They raise horses in Canada.
Yeah.
And then you've just solved your hunger across the world. Not solved it, but made a dent in it.
Definitely helped it.
Definitely helped it. We could have done this when we were flying empty planes to Afghanistan and put 20 trailer loads up on there and still stayed within the shipping laws. Over there, fed them, taught them how to maintain that, and move thousands of horses out of this country. Why aren't we doing that when we're sending millions and billions of dollars, which this would cost nothing?
Yeah. It's a great question.
You probably saw this the other
Yeah,
day.
Shopcott.
Yeah, so I got a guy send me a DM on Instagram. Can you show this to Endow? And ESPN MMA posted it. For me, horse meat is the best meat in the world because it's the tastiest, has more vitamins in it. He cannot imagine his life without horse meat.
He's from Kazakhstan. He's a UFC fighter. He's on the path to
Fantastic.
be world champion.
Yeah.
But they love horses where he's from, both for working, having, and eating. Then you look at I wouldn't necessarily say they're like a super progressed country when you compare it to like France and Japan and all. They're the ones that are also saying it's the best meat on the planet. So it is just wild to me that the U.S., for whatever reason, Canada does it, Mexico does it, Japan, Switzerland, France, like all these major progressed countries. But for whatever reason in the U.S., it is like completely untouchable, or not even untouchable. It's like you can't even think about it.
It's a paradigm shift that we're going to have because, if you'd asked somebody 30 years ago if they'd ever eat a mountain lion, the answer is not no, it's hell no.
Yeah.
But now people eat mountain lion. I've eaten mountain lion. Mm-hmm. It's great. It's fine. It's just a paradigm shift in what's feasible. Just
thanks to Brady, mountain lion. I had come back. It is extremely good.
Yeah. I never would have. I'd have been in that camp. But
I would rather have it over mule deer.
Yeah.
With what I had.
Yeah, I think it
was extremely good.
Back in the 70s, we used to take them down to the Outlaw Bar in Baker, Nevada, and she'd put them in the chicken broster, and the whole town would come over.
Really?
It was really good.
Yeah, we'd eat lion all the time.
Yes, I think it's just a paradigm shift. And
I want to throw a point to you guys too, because we're not the only country that it's like we're not understanding this. Think about India.
Sure.
The cow is a sacred animal there, and that's what we're consuming and nobody thinks twice about it. So, I think it goes back to education and really the hard conversations, whether it's nutritionists, everything else, discussing the benefits of this. And at the end of the day, we're America. You got a choice.
Yeah.
You can eat it or not eat it. And trust me, there's still places and folks in different cultures in the United States that wouldn't think twice about eating a horse.
Well, there's a lot of big game hunters. If you gave tags, you see it on social media all the time. Give me a tag and I'll go hunt them.
Oh, this is such an easy problem to solve.
I
Honest to
agree.
Pete, I mean, we sit around and we talk about it, but legitimately, this is the easiest problem on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Take the politics
Because
out. I've always said that. Give me $1 million, 6 months, we're good.
Yeah.
Why don't people have trouble seeing a deer on the back of a bumper, but God forbid that be a horse?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the,
the same
that's the
animal.
crazy thing to me. Is especially, I don't know what it is about me in my mind, but like the fact that France and Japan, like Switzerland, it doesn't bother them, but us, it's the weirdest thought to me.
My girlfriend in Austria said that's pretty expensive sausage, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they're using it as sausage.
Well, you can't have a fur coat in California.
Well, we won't get into California.
It's just bizarre. I mean,
Another continent.
if you look at animals on a landscape, you look at deer, elk, antelope, whatever the species might be, we fund a wildlife agency, essentially pays for itself, right? You allocate hunting permits, people go out, they pay for their permit. We fund the management of those species. Horses, it's no different than any other animal. This could be so simple and so easy to solve if we
Agreed.
just be allowed to do so. I
Logically.
guarantee you could issue permits for horses
That would be paid for
that would be paid for.
Income
They-
for the state.
They,
and be still held under the wanton waste laws. That we
Oh,
would still be
absolutely.
butchering
I
and
think
eating.
today, the demand would be high enough. You could eliminate a lot of horses.
Well, that's what I was getting. If
People
we're not
would
gonna-
hunt them. And the other thing is, this is the other weird thing. I mean, we talk about lions, bears, whatever it might be, right? And there's this current day and age where it's like, oh, if you kill it, yeah, you got to eat it, right? There's this correlation. There's still a lot of states. You kill a black bear, you don't have to eat it. You kill a mountain lion, you don't have to harvest the meat. You can still take the head and the hide, right? And you can debate all along whether right or wrong or what the ethics of that
Right.
might be. But there's still states that manage wildlife species where that's allowable. Horses, if you don't want to eat a horse, I don't see why it should be any different than a bear or a mountain lion. Like at this point, it's an ecological factor. Like you've got to eliminate this mouth on the landscape for the good of all.
Why are we importing horse meat into the United States to feed zoo animals? That's happening.
It's a
Did
great
you
question.
know that?
I did not know that, and that's a phenomenal question.
Right.
Because
I did
we
not
used to
know
have
that.
it right here in our backyard. But
So we're
there
importing
are
horse meat from another country to feed zoo animals.
zoo animals or some of these refuge. Talk to people behind the scenes and find out from them.
Stuff
What
is
are they
just-
feeding these animals?
Yeah.
What are they
Stuff is
feeding their
just
lions?
asinine.
It's insane.
Well, it's like bringing steel and concrete from China. I mean, how much sense does that make? You know?
Yeah. A lot
Yeah,
of
it's
things don't make
asinine.
sense over the last little bit.
Hopefully that's changing. Hopefully that's changing.
But that actually, what I was getting at, if we're not going to be flying helicopters and shooting them like Australia, right, where things just lay to rest and whatever happens, happens. And I agree with Trail that right now I think there is enough want out there that hunters would fund this themselves,
Oh,
where the states would actually make money off of controlling the population. And I mean, I honestly, with as good as horse meat is, look, I've traveled international, I have had it. It is very good. But I would be completely fine with wanton waste laws on the horse as well.
It's bigger than that at this point. That's what I'm saying. Man, if I get a chance to go bow hunt horses, I'm all in.
All in.
Sign me up. I'll take 5.
Well, if you're going to watch a range, they'll walk up to you.
Yeah, you got to wait 5 or 10 years for a deer tag. Got to do
Might as well
something.
hunt horses in the meantime.
Well,
It's
did
like
you-
the feral camels in Australia, where you're allowed to just go out there and hunt them.
Yeah, but it'd probably be the same thing if you guys heard about that, the Navajo Nation, how they had to try to do a horse hunt in 2018
Yeah,
and it
it
got
got
canceled
yeah,
in
it
like
got shut
24
down.
hours.
Oh, I never heard of that one.
Yeah, they were going to try to have
Was
a
that
horse
on a
hunt to remove
tribal land?
60
or-
Yeah.
Okay.
to remove 60 horses,
I do remember that now
and it
that
got
you
shut
talk about
down
it.
because of activists.
Yep. And this is tribal lands.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah.
still have a slaughter
Yeah.
plant on tribal land.
My guess is they still did it, just a little more under the radar.
It was
my
like,
guess.
and there was
been.
severe drought in the area, competition for food and water,
Right.
Yeah.
and they wanted to help mule deer populations. They
Right.
mentioned mule deer in the article, and they wanted to have a hunt, and it got shut down.
Joel, you've been on the landscape a long time, right? You've hunted and fished. I don't want not derogatory. You, yeah,
Well, that's okay.
you
You always hear
you got me.
you always hear about old trappers. Well, I'm an old trapper.
He remembers when the car was developed, introduced.
You've hunted and trapped your whole life, right?
Yeah.
What impact to wildlife have you seen, just observationally, due to wild horses, feral horses?
Well, I've seen probably the biggest thing that's happened is probably fires, but horses aren't that far behind it. And the problem is we raise a bunch of money. I mean, there's like 33 big game banquets in the state of Nevada raising funds for primarily habitat. You know, it's like I was talking to one of the guys in Endow, and he says, God, we go out and we do all these efforts for habitat, and the horses just come in and ruin it. And I said, well, where are we doing that then? I mean, where are we raising, where are we trying? I mean, we all have a vested interest. We want good rangelands. We want rangelands that will support big game animals and everything else. But they prevent those of us that'll put our money and our time and effort into it. Look at NBU and the guzzler programs and stuff. These things go break the fences down and everything. They prevent us from doing our good work. That's a huge thing. But water is just terrible. You know, you get up in Elko, you got streams and things, but out through a lot of central Nevada and southern Nevada, I mean, some of these little springs, they'll produce 5 gallons, you know, and those horses have to stay right on it. Well, a bighorn sheep or a deer isn't as big as a horse, and, you know,
Gets pushed off.
guess who gets the water? You know, I'm bigger than somebody. If I wanted the water, I'd keep them away, and that's what horses do.
Yeah.
It's not right.
Yeah.
And those are the animals that are supposed to be here. You know?
The natural wildlife.
And the biggest thing I'd say is just this stuff's decades and centuries out. You know, this stuff takes, in certain habitats, it's going to take forever to come back, if ever. You take like the white sage flats in eastern Nevada, that has a different soil under it, and that'll blow away. You know, those bacon powder holes you drive through, that just this dirt goes in the air. You know, when that gets overgrazed, you lose that soil and you lose that plant. You know, it's called winter fat, but it's an ice cream plant. It's a terribly good grazing plant, but once it's gone, and so is its habitat, which is the soil.
Yeah.
And that is funny with winter fat. We've seen so many areas gone from horses because, you know, basically when the sheep are eating the winter fat, which is the ice cream, they're doing it at the right time of year, but then the horses come in there, and I've got pictures in my catalog of just showing where it was so much winter fat, and then you put a quarter on top, and there's barely a stick. It's gone.
Yeah,
It's gone.
we've lost a lot. You know, cheatgrass has
Yeah.
taken over a lot. You know, but,
Horses spread that.
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, the horses are just. You put fires and horses and everything else. It's not.
It's not good.
No, it's not.
Compounding.
I mean, we went from 250,000 deer in '88 down to what they say 60,000 now, and I don't think there's 60,000 myself.
I would agree.
Yeah. Do you feel like we're at critical mass? Like that term? I mean,
There's no way out at this point.
In places, there's places that are still pretty good.
Well, yeah. But what I'm saying is, in the big picture of it, I'm saying the big picture of it. There's no way out, because for years and years, as I was working in the government, we'd continue and expand pasture lands and go out and do these contracts. And when you look at the list on the website, because everything's on there, and start to realize we've run out of land. And I still have that argument with people saying, well, let's just go to, these ranches that aren't there anymore. Or people are selling Damani Ranch. The whole development that was a ranch is now housing areas. Urban growth has taken over. We only have so much land out there. And as urban growth continues to grow, those ranches are gone. Kids nowadays aren't taking over the family business anymore. They're selling for a residential area, right? So there is no more room to continuously play this game of adoptions. After you look at the numbers and see, you might adopt anywhere from 2,500 horses a year to the highest last year in years to be 8,000. We need to gather almost 20,000 a year just in Nevada to get to an appropriate management level within, say, 5 years. That's 20,000 just in Nevada. We don't have the capacity of gathering 20,000 horses combining the 10 western states. So we're beyond the point, because after all these millions of dollars spent in the last 5 years to try to get down to that, to say, like in the Obama years, we're not going to gather anything we can't adopt. You're going to double your population levels, and you destroyed the habitat, and you spent hundreds of millions of dollars for nothing.
It'd be nice if we could get to the Trump boys, because they're like us, they're hunters.
Yeah.
And, I see that as being possible. I know guys that actually know them.
Yeah.
There's probably 20,000 horses in long-term pastures right now over the age of 10. There's probably 30,000 in those over the age of 10. So if they're not adopted and we want to start somewhere, let's start small. We can't do it in a year. This is going to take a long time. But let's finally have those conversations that were in the dark rooms and have them out loud.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. This is awesome.
But that's where we need to talk about it with a group of voters.
How many people are listening to this, do you think?
What do we get? I don't know. I'd have to look. Let's see. We'll probably get, I know that we almost, I don't know. Do I want to say? I know we've had a couple million downloads.
Yeah.
For the last, year, I think.
Well, there'll be people hearing this then.
Oh,
Yeah,
for
a lot
sure.
of people.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll tell you, if there's people with a boat that want to have a sidebar conversation, my door is open. The Wildlife Coalition Nevada's open. The Healthy Lands Coalition, their doors are open.
Well, we probably ought to think about a lawsuit. We really should.
Yeah,
just to get the attention, if nothing else.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned that before. Do you think that is the next step as far as pushing to get something to happen?
Well, it might work. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't. I mean, you read the thing. I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, it says what it says.
Yeah.
That takes that takes
Seems
money.
pretty clearly stated.
But that's going to raise awareness that we're out there. Like I say, it's got to be us and the ranchers, from what I can see. I don't know what other vested interest group is going to do this, and it's going to have to happen in Nevada. I mean, California's got quite a few, Arizona's got quite a few, but
Nothing like this.
Nobody's even close to us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be here.
And Wyoming's fighting it right now.
We need help from the other. I'm not saying just let them off the hook, but the leadership probably has to come from here.
Colorado would like to see, currently the administration that's in Colorado wants to see helicopter gatherers stopped and have no idea that it's the safest thing out there to do. It's like you're up in the sky and you can push cows and see what's 2 miles ahead and avoid a danger.
But everybody thought that the lions would go down in Colorado, and they didn't.
Right. But I'm saying, it has to be done by someone that can really get into the complexities of this, can read the previous cases that have failed, and make sure they're not repeating it. Because again, this is one of those things, you fail once, you're host. These activists can keep, filing TROs, temporary restraining orders, which used to work, doesn't work anymore. So they've lost that, but they've got their next card in the deal of how they're going to attack it.
But people respond to squeaky wheels,
Yep.
and the activists are the squeaky wheels. We need to start squeaking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
that's
historically we haven't been. We've always just kind of,
We play defense.
we
We
play defense,
play
and we
defense.
kind of sit by the wayside a lot. I mean, we've talked about it internally. A lot of us in the fall, we go hunting, and that's what we do. And
Yeah.
we're not
but
really
now
thinking-
you're feeling it.
Yeah, but now you're feeling it.
Now
yeah,
it's
you're
affecting
you're
you.
seeing it. Yeah, you're seeing it directly impact, species richness as a whole, and then also your own personal opportunity to go hunting.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
it's
you're
not
feeling
just
it.
the hunters. Think about the recreationists.
Sure.
Think about the bird watchers. Think about just the people that want to go camping anymore. I'm sorry. I want to go camping in the woods or on a nice plain, and if it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think maybe there's potential with this new administration. Maybe there's potential with the lawsuit. We're talking about it in our coalitions.
Mm-hmm.
Day after tomorrow, it's gonna be elevated at a state level. The world's run by those that show up.
Yeah.
yes.
Is there a way that people can get involved? Like, what would you suggest people do at this point? If they have an opinion on it, what can they do?
Jackie Rosen, Cortez Masto, Mark
Okay.
Amaday, Susie Lee, Horsford.
Read
Tho-
the act first.
Read the act. Would be great.
Those
Yeah.
are our representatives from Nevada
Mm-hmm.
that are in the body that controls this, controls the purse strings.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way our government works. Contact your representative and tell them that you got a problem with what's going on, and
If there's a
and-
donate now sign.
and social media.
Yeah.
Social
Yeah.
media. That's
So you would say reference the act and ask that they manage according
Yeah.
to the law.
But get educated first. Well, right. And get educated first. And I'm going to tell people over and over again, and I'll tell exactly the folks to their face because we've done it. If the first thing you see on a website of a group that calls themselves an advocate and loves horses is donate now, you're not going to find facts on that website. That is not the truth. And if your heart is really in it, it's like, don't donate to Humane Society of America because none of the money goes. Donate food and stuff to your local Humane Society. Educate yourself first there. Look at science. There are so many scientific papers. If you're into that kind of stuff and can understand it, on everything these people are saying that's misinformation, type in a scientific paper because these people aren't scientists. They're Tom, Dick, and Harry, 57-year-old women that want a hobby to do, and find out what their background is. We got people lying saying they've got degrees. Look it up if you want to go that far.
yeah. They're from England and Switzerland.
Yeah. People that don't even have a vote here are out here taking pictures during gathers and disrupting gathers where 10 years ago people were coming out
Well,
to
that was her
better
job.
understand it.
That was her job at the gathers was to
babysit.
babysit the activists
That were
No
looking
kidding.
for their money shot.
and all they had these $10,000 cameras just looking the money shot so that they could put it on social media.
It's
and-
unbelievable.
Take
and
a
donate,
1,000 pictures a day until they got that one right
So
there.
dirty.
Or one rearing up in the pen, or one breaking a leg, or, we can gather 2,500 horses, but if one breaks its leg, it's one too many. That is their fundraiser. So if people don't understand that donate now, or if you donate now, to this organization, we've got a matcher. They will use every bad picture that they can possibly get. Not somebody hitting a horse in the car, because that's the people's fault. But the BLM, roping a stallion and it falling in a hole and breaking a leg, and that sucks, because that person it's on their mind. But know that these are fundraisers. These are fundraisers so these people can pay their 5 people that have salaries of almost $200,000 a year and then walk the halls of Congress and file lawsuits they lose.
Well, that'd
That's
be
what it's doing.
The most effective thing for us to do is just mirror exactly what they're doing. You have grassroots activism, you have professional activism, and but you got to pay somebody to go to Washington, D.C. and sit in the office. And
I agree on that. I mean, I agree we need to balance the field as lobbyists. But what I don't agree with is necessarily, and it's kind of a joke with the people that have flipped, that were
there's
with
a lot
those
of them.
activist groups
Good
that
friends,
have
yeah.
hugely turned around, like just
yeah.
had that aha moment.
This is
and
building
realized.
steam. It really is.
Yeah.
I don't see how it couldn't be with how drastic it is.
It's just
not
wrong.
fair.
There's no cover up anymore.
If you love the horse and nothing else out there, you don't love the horse very much. That's BS. It's a lie, because if you're allowing them to live this kind of life, it's on you. That's it. You're not gonna make dinner and invite 2 couples over and think that if 10 show up, you got enough food for 10 people, 10 couples. So just think about the basics, on there. Land can only handle so many animals out there. And the screaming, they go into these terrible holding pens and there's no shade for them. Have you gone out to Nevada?
Like they're
And then, oh my God, we're going to put them in the BLM holding pens, waiting for them to be adopted. They should go to a sanctuary. Well, what's happening at the sanctuary? Because at BLM holding pens, it's transparent. They got a veterinarian on duty. They're giving them shots. They're vaccinating them. They're gilding the stallions that are there. And if something happens to them, they're separated in a sick pen. That horse that went to the sanctuary, you know what happened to him?
He was in a sanctuary.
Yeah.
Makes you feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah. So it goes back to stop with the bleeding hearts. The squeaky wheels don't work anymore. It's not the cow's fault. Stop deflecting. Quit deflecting, and let's start paying attention to, if you really love this animal, then stop killing it.
Yeah. So they're just holding up from withholding the law that's actually placed. Like you guys keep saying, it's pretty plain and simple, and we all agree. But they just keep taking it to litigation and holding it up and holding it up.
And Congress puts riders on it, and a rider is during the appropriations, and that's how the slaughter. There's no slaughter in the United States anymore. They'll put a rider in the appropriations. We used to call it the Green Book when I was doing the budget and stuff back in D.C. Congress can literally, and read a bill one time. Read a bill, and you're going to be amazed at what's stuck in those bills. Can literally hide something in there that says it is illegal for the Department of Agriculture to inspect horse meat and using appropriated funds by the government. Done.
Well, it's like saying you can hunt elk, but you can only use a 22 rimfire,
Yeah.
or you can hunt geese, but you can only use
Good
a 410
example.
or something like that. You can regulate it to the point where technically you can, but you can't.
You can.
Yeah.
And they'll even do stuff saying, you're getting $141 million, but $11 million of that must be spent on fertility control drugs.
Yeah, and tell them about who owns the drug.
And the rumor is, because I haven't been able to, the rumor is one of the largest activists that call them an advocacy group that now changed their last initial to conservation instead of campaign in the last year. Supposedly down deep in one of their LLCs, they own the patent to the one they're using on the Washoe Lake Range, PZP, which is, if you want to talk fertility control drugs, one, they're not at appropriate management levels. It's an inhumane treatment for mares because it only lasts a year to 18 months.
And that's
keeps
a rumor too. It's important we say that.
Yeah, the owning the patent on PZP, it's the rumor, but it's been heard over and over again. And that same company owns a cosmetic company now and a clothing company. That are all LLCs, by the way. That are all 501c4s, by the way. It's funny how they're expanded.
It all adds up.
But fertility control, for Congress to say, of that 141 million, 11 million must be used on fertility control. This PZP keeps a mare in heat. With the overpopulation, basically, these mares are being raped on the range because there's stallion after stallion after stallion breeding her because This PZP, all it does is coat the egg and eventually wears off so that the sperm can't enter the egg. We're using, not we, but the BLM is using another drug that seems to last longer called Gonacon and seems to be working toward minimizing the cycles. There are 2 studies out right now that actually go right into the oocyte, which stops, egg production. And if they can, it's been successful in the domestic market, if they can get a drug like that, I'm all for it. But to run a wild animal through a pen to age them, and then run them through a pen to shoot a needle in them, and then 30 days later round them up again, which is never going to happen, to give them a booster, you're wasting taxpayer dollars.
Sure.
I mean, if you're going to shoot them, just shoot them.
It sounds like a perfect task for Doge, Department of Government
It's
Efficiency.
just crazy to me.
Yeah,
I mean, when you
I know a vaccine that's cure it forever.
as you talk about this, it just seems so insane.
Literally
is.
insane.
I mean, it literally seems insane.
Read the first line of the act. It was, have you ever read a law that starts out with an emotional statement like that?
Yeah.
The pioneer of the Old West.
But the thing is, we got to do something different because
Yeah.
that's been 51 years now.
54 years.
54, yeah, I guess time's
Almost.
getting away from me here. But
1971 Act.
Yeah, that was-
53 years, sorry.
I was still in high school then.
Yeah.
And look at me now.
That's another thing. We're going to get rid of the BLM. Oh, they've been doing it for 53 years. I don't think, little so-and-so down in Stagecoach, you're going to do a better job.
Yeah.
It just is insane. You think about animals, and you're like, these ones we're okay with.
Some get it and some don't.
These ones we can manage. That one we can't. It's just
yeah.
this. It's
Yeah.
this. Sets up on a pedestal. It's just
Such a
it's
weird
l-
thing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I don't understand it. It's
well,
insane.
there's so much in this country that's like that, and hopefully it's
Yeah.
the needle's moving. I hope
hopefully,
so.
hopefully it'll fall on ears. More people will go, huh?
Well,
Interesting.
There's some of us that are trying. And,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I thank you guys for reaching out. And, look, I'm not, if the minute I think I've learned it all, I'm crazy, right? All I can use is my experience firsthand and across the way. And I am passionate about this. And I am a horse lover. And I do have one in the backyard along with my 2 quarter horses as a branded Mustang. But I'm not going to have 10 horses back there. And I'm not going to sit there and over get a phone call of a horse suffering up on the range and what do we do with it? Because I probably still get 10, 20 calls a week on, hey, I'm sitting here. And I'll tell you hunters too. You see stuff out on the range, take a GPS and call your local BLM Forest Service office. The more and more of this starts happening, because you guys are the ones with the feet on the ground, the boots on the ground. You guys are seeing the destruction of water holes, the lack of animals out there. And when you walk out in 105, which would have been prime area 10 years ago, and all you're seeing is piles of, stud piles and horse shit out there, and not a single other animal out there, we got a problem. And
Yeah.
it's affecting you.
Well, let's tackle it. I appreciate you guys coming.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
definitely.
been awesome.
We kept you for a long time, but I knew you guys would do.
I told you it'd be over an hour.
I knew it would be. I wanted it to be. I could listen to it. I just think it's awesome that you made the trip, and we really appreciate
I
it.
agree.
And I hope. Feels like one of those topics where hopefully we can find some means of like uniting and then putting all that effort into some course of action that will have real meaningful outcomes in the long run. And I know, Hal, I think we probably need to push it more with Hal for wildlife and different groups. Dan's another one.
Oh yeah, Dan's awesome. He's amazing.
Yeah, I just think it's a good time. We have a lot of momentum from some wins. I think we have a lot of people on board.
Yeah.
More people are listening. More people are tuning in, and I hope that we can do something to get the conversations out there and then move the needle.
Well, there's not. It's a national issue, although it's so much. But you got Hal. we've got the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus.
Right.
That, you know, I think that's a resource we really need to work on. We've got a Sportsmen's Caucus in the Nevada legislature, but here again, that's state. And it really needs to be in Congress. But
And people that understand what the issue is. I mean, you know.
well, you got to get to the people that have the votes.
Yeah.
You have to get to either that, or you got to get to the judges that'll give you a judgment.
Yeah. But you need people
Or you need to get
communicating it.
to a president that's willing to tell the Department of Interior
Yep.
that
Well.
this needs to be done, or to the people that want to get rid of government inefficiency, because this is just prime. I mean, when they first said that on TV, I thought, wild horses.
Yeah.
Right.
First thing came into my mind, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
This,
wasn't the Department of Education. It was, for me, it was wild horses.
yeah.
Yeah.
Started up as barbecue right after that.
Yeah. The Doge team. This seems perfect for them.
It is.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm thrilled that you guys reached out. You know, we are available, and I mean, you're saying it's a passion of ours, and you know, it's a passion. At the end of the day, it's a passion about the humanity of, you know, not only the horse itself, but geez, our wildlife, and mainly for our rangelands, because I'm afraid of what's happening to our rangelands.
Yeah.
And this is not, you know, rocket science. If there's no food, there's nothing. And if we don't stand up and see the decimation of these lands and how quickly it happens, we're in a world of hurt.
As far as our big game animals, I think it's habitat and then predators second. And, you know, that's
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it. It's probably a good spot to leave it. I think like a call to action, you know. I mean, it's critical mass. It's time to do something and, you know, let your voices be heard. So I appreciate you guys coming.
well, anybody wants to zoom in Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Zoom
Yeah.
into that down here, and there's, you know, we can give you the link to that stuff for Department of Ag, but I don't know when this is airing or
Tomorrow.
if it's
Hopefully tomorrow or Friday. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Then-
We'll get it out.
Then I'll give you guys that, because they can zoom in, they can make public comment, and
Perfect.
absolutely.
Perfect.
You know, I don't care if it's 5 seconds of a public comment. Let's balance this field, because
Yeah.
the activists are going to be there, and they're going to be crying about misinformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
If there's
they need the
more of
support.
us than them, that's
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's always good.
yeah.
Well, thanks for coming and thank you
Yeah,
for
appreciate it.
all your effort.
very